Good afternoon. I'm Rev Dave Thompson. I'd like to welcome you back to our Civil Human Bible study. I'm a civil human minister, so what that means is that my ministry focuses on human peace and common ground. And it's my effort to look at these scriptures to see what I can find as a human being that I feel is relatable and can be extracted from here and taught to all humans across the board. And secondly, as a civil human minister, I want to do that in a civil manner, which means that I want to respect those basic shared human needs that we all have. The need to believe what we want to about our own creeds, the need to be independent from control, the need to vote for those who will have control over us, the need to intimately love somebody, and the need to live and let live. I'm excited to now be on YouTube. This is our second broadcast. Hopefully we have some better audio today. And we're in the book of Matthew right now. So let's go ahead and jump into that. It's Matthew chapter 15, verses 1 through 9. Starting with verse 1. Then the scribes and Pharisees who were from Jerusalem came to Jesus saying, "Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat." But he answered and said to them, "Why do you also transgress the commandment of God because of your tradition? For God commanded, saying, 'Honor your father and your mother, and he who curses his father or mother, let him be put to death.' But you say, 'Whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me has been dedicated to the temple,' is released from honoring his father or mother. Thus you have made the commandment of God of no effect by your tradition. Hypocrites! Well did Isaiah prophesy about you, saying, 'These people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me, and in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men.'" I actually really love the fact that Jesus uses the word hypocrite often. It's fantastic. And I love the fact that he does not mind going toe to toe with people who are his elders, the people that he was supposed to respect in his community. It is really important to notice in this passage, starting in this chapter, Matthew, who wrote this book, tells us that the Pharisees and scribes were coming from Jerusalem. So even today, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Even back then, though, it was the capital of Israel, and it also had the temple of Israel, which was the place, the center of ritual for following the Jewish faith. It was the place of education. It was a place where the elders and the leaders in the religious community would gather and spend most of their time doing the work of teaching, doing the ritual, probably offering counsel or advice and judging others. So that was their big deal. The fact that they come all the way over to Jesus to talk to him and actually confront him about this issue is pretty amazing to me. First of all, that they do even bother, but second of all, that the issue they bring forth is so minuscule, we're going to see. And it's actually this great liberty and opportunity for Jesus to kind of point the finger back at them for the things that they are doing that are far more exceeding of breaking the commands and laws of God. So what's going on here, right? What are the Pharisees talking about here? They're saying, that your disciples aren't washing their hands. And as a result of it, we were offended because the tradition states that you're supposed to wash your hands before the meal for purity's sake. They're not doing it, so they are offending or transgressing the Israelite tradition, but also God, the Israelite God, as a result of it. So why this big tradition? Why this issue? Well, the problem is that, in this day, the religious laws were sort of the same as the political and social laws. In America here and in many Western countries and democracies and others, we sort of separate what are the religious laws and what are the societal laws or secular laws that we all follow. In these times, because Israel is a theocracy, meaning that they are ruled by the religious laws, there are a tremendous amount of tiny little laws about purity. And the Pharisees, who are these religious leaders, are experts at living a life of purity. You know, we might look to monks, for instance, who live in the mountains practicing, prayer and fasting and all of these things to be pure. Well, it wasn't much different back then. These Pharisees were experts at all of these little tiny laws that would keep them pure, because if they touched, for instance, a dead body, or they touched somebody who was considered unclean or had a disease, or there are any number of things that would make them unclean, they couldn't touch food and they couldn't do certain rituals until they washed their hands. It made sense back then, obviously, for sanitation reasons, of course, but it's a tradition. This is not one of the 10 commandments that you may be familiar with. The 10 laws that Moses gives the Israelite people from God that are like the cornerstones of what they're supposed to do. And so they're pointing out, look, your disciples aren't washing their hands, they're not following these purity laws. So what happens, and I love this about Jesus, because he doesn't care about who's in charge. He cares about what's important and what the virtues are. And he points out, okay, fine. So we are transgressing these traditions by washing hands, but what about you? You're not only transgressing a tradition or something that's been handed down generation to generation, you're actually transgressing against a key virtue and a key law. And because of your traditions, which you have handed down through the generations, you're using these traditions to law. So how are they doing that? Jesus points out a very specific example that really was just one of several examples that he could point to during those days. But this one is about honoring your father and mother. Keep in mind, of course, this is an ancient society. So these individuals, families, are super important, because there is no social welfare system. There's no Medicaid or Medi-Cal. There's no way to provide for elderly people except that their families do the same. And so in this culture and in these ancient times, family is very important. Your parents cared for you, and therefore you are supposed to honor and value your parents and care for them. And this word honor, it really means a fixed price, is literally what the word means. But essentially is ascribing value or deserving of protection and deserving of respect, that sort of thing. So what's Jesus talking about, right? He stated this law. You're supposed to honor your father and your mother. But what are the Pharisees doing? So here's this really weird loophole that they've created for individuals who are children of their parents. So in this example, there's a gentleman who is telling his parents, hey, all that money that I had that I was supposed to give to you to protect you in your old age? Well, I donated it to the temple, and so therefore I am free from any obligation to care for you. And why did this happen? Where did this come from? Well, the Pharisees, in their traditions, would write certain rules to qualify in certain circumstances that you didn't need to follow certain portions of the law because of whatever it was, the situation. In this case, they made a loophole, allowing individuals to give their inheritance, essentially, and give their value of their families to the temple, and so to the Pharisees. So you can imagine why Jesus is upset about this, and why the Pharisees don't want people to recognize this, because this loophole provides a significant possibility for the religious leaders to make money. It's no big surprise there, right? That's just human nature. We see that all the time here today. And so Jesus points out, look, you've made these little loopholes, but you are violating the very heart and the very virtue of our society, that we care for those who have cared for us, that we honor our father and mother and in all ways, and that we're supposed to take care of them because they're going to be without any protection. And that is not compassionate, which of course is a virtue that Jesus is talking about. And then he quotes Isaiah as kind of a close. So Isaiah is this really important prophet for the kingdom of Israel at this time, and even still to this day. he was one of the most significant sort of preachers and teachers who came out against a lot of the false gods that were being practiced by Israel. They were starting to turn away from Yahweh, which is the God of Israel, and starting to practice the worship Baal and other religions. So Isaiah was really important, and they really respected him. So when Jesus quotes him, it's kind of like a slap to the face, really, because he mentions that Isaiah says that they're paying lip service, that they are hypocrites, and that all of their worship, all of this ritual that they're doing, all of these little laws that they're employing are completely pointless and mean nothing to God because they don't uphold the virtues. This is something that we've seen as a theme of Jesus throughout this book of Matthew so far, and even all the other books of the scriptures of the New Testament talking about Jesus. This is a current, a constant theme, and that is, on one hand we have the virtues, on the other hand we have the rules. The virtues are the things that do not change, regardless of time, regardless of circumstance. Compassion is always good. Compassion is always beneficial to a happy person and happy society, as is humility and self-restraint. These are things that don't change regardless of 2,000 years. The things that do change, however, are the rules. The way that we employ these virtues, the way that we practice them in our society, these are what change. And Jesus is pointing out to these Pharisees, these rules that you have created are destroying the virtues. I want to cross that over, take that concept, bring it 2,000 years, and put it right before us, right here and right now. That same line of argument is just as meaningful and just as poignant as it has ever been. For those of you who come from religious backgrounds, I came from a fairly conservative Christian background, and it was all about ritual. It was all about purity. It was all about doing the right things so that you were always a better person and could get closer to God as a result of it. A lot of times that meant I spent a lot of time praying and doing worship, music, and doing all these little things that I thought were important, meanwhile completely lacking in compassion for those around me, for the suffering around me, completely lacking in humility, considering myself better than other people. I was employing rules that were destroying the virtues that Jesus set out, and that is upheld and across time, and I truly believe are universal human truths. These virtues are human virtues. And so we have to look at our traditions, our histories, the rules we live by, and ask ourselves the question, am I doing what is humble? Am I doing what is compassionate? Am I practicing self-restraint? Am I showing mercy and forgiveness? Those are human virtues that cross all of our religious backgrounds, that cross all of our ethnic and cultural divides. These are the things that are most important in our society. I want to thank you for joining me today. I'm so grateful that you continue to be a part of this Bible study. It is wonderful to have you. And I want to say to you, I love you. And I hope you choose to love yourself, because it's the only love that we can control. And now, I'd like to invite you to join me as we go about the rest of our day, loving our neighbor the same way.